So, to the best of my ability, given what my job is, I've been avoiding a lot of Death Stranding news and trailers, just kind of like because I want to be able to satisfy my curiosity once I have that game in front of me. But I know like the biggest talking point is like, none of this has made any sense. None of this makes any sense. And Peter, you actually got to talk to Kojima last week.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it actually does make sense. And one of the things that caught my eye in your interview was the concept of Omoi-yari.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit, actually? Because I'm still kind of confused.
The best I can. Apparently there's not really like a strong English equivalent, but the closest would be like, you know, having empathy or compassion, but completely. And that doesn't necessarily mean just like doing something nice for somebody. It means like really trying to understand where they're coming from, what it is they do or do not feel or have or do not have. And, you know, I think a lot of the stuff Kojima talks about with Death Stranding has to do with connection. And we, as gamers, know that means connecting between each other. But the stuff we've seen has been pretty sort of surface level, right? Like leave an item for someone or like leave a note, which is stuff we've all seen before. But that's always existed in games, at least to my recollection, as sort of like an aspect of the experience. What Kojima was telling me was that this concept of Omoi-yari is sort of his focus for this entire aspect of the game. And he described it as like, you know, when you go to a restaurant in Japan, they're not just there to serve you food and make you happy because they're gonna get tips like in America. You know, they really do go out of their way, and it's true in a lot of my experiences, to make you feel like, hey, you're at home, you don't have to worry about anything, whatever you need, we'll take care of you. And it's like they're putting themselves in your shoes when they're serving you, and they really want to understand what it is they can do to make you happy. And I don't know that the stuff we've seen is going to do that for me. Like if I find a water bottle that you left, I don't know that I'm gonna think, oh my God, this person like knows me and, you know, whatever. But
well, that's devastating.
But the fact that Kojima is developing the game to try to convey that specifically, to me, is very interesting. And it does help explain a little bit of why these things that seem so minor might all add up to something bigger.
Yeah, I think in reading that interview, I got a better understanding of, I talked to you guys about this earlier, like I got a better understanding of where Kojima was coming from when he said, I don't really know what the game is about. Because I feel like, and I'm gonna sound like a Kojima apologist or like, which is not what I want to sound like, but I think the thing that he's coming from is like, what I've put in here is a feeling. It's an ethos. It's a way of life, kind of, almost like this is an experience that I've had. Like, how do you tangibly take those kind of ideas and themes and feelings and put them into a way that people can understand? It's got to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
And he's the kind of person who traditionally avoids trying to reduce his games or experiences to things that the broader industry and the broader, you know, fan base of games would want, like, you know, genre tags. He kind of shies away from that, for better or worse. From some people's perspective, it's, you know, arrogance. He doesn't want to say, you know, call a spade and say it's an action game, open world exploration game. But for others, like, he's trying, for me, I take it as, at least he's trying to think about it from a different angle that's a little more stirring, a little more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all he says is that, yeah, I mean, he did name this like, you know, social strand system and strand action game, but, you know, according to him, he only came up with those things because people just kept asking him, what is this? And so for lack of a better, you know, reason, that's why he came up with the name for it.
Yeah. The whole like, what is this conversation annoyed me though, because it was just like, do we have to always know? Like, I think a lot of people treat like trailer announcements as like another PR opportunity, or like we have to get all the information out of this that we can. And I think to some extent, like we do that in our jobs because that's what people who play games are interested in. Like, what can we glean from this information, as if it's a puzzle we put together. But with this, it's like, it seems to me, especially from the interview that you did with Kojima, that it's about evoking a feeling, and that's not something you get from marketing.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, it's one of those things, like, I don't need to know everything about what it is before I play it.
Yeah, and he did lay out a bunch of stuff at TGS, right, to satisfy the sort of curiosity of people who are like, look, I'm not looking at this as a thought experiment. I'm looking at this as a video game I might purchase. And so, yeah, he kind of explained like, all right, here we go. We're gonna run through almost an hour of gameplay. Like, You're going to be walking around the environment. You're going to be leaving things that other players might use to traverse said environment. You're going to be trying to connect different parts of America. Like all that stuff kind of makes sense on paper. But he said, he's noticing a lot of Western media sort of characterize this as, oh, it's just a walking simulator then. Which I think undersells some of it, okay, he's not like 100% from top to bottom the most thoughtful person in the world as we see him, right? Like he has a lot of like tongue-in-cheek kind of like jokey things, like we were joking about names like Hot Coldman earlier or Mama or whatever, like he's not everything is this huge, deep, thoughtful thing, but I think you can pee, but to be fair, and that actually, I cut that from the interview because it didn't really it wasn't relevant, but I thanked him for putting that in a game because there are no games that make you go to the bathroom and it's ridiculous. And that's the thing.
I derailed you, we can get back on that.
I digress. So, yes, people are focusing on the mechanics of the game that they show him, or that he showed us, but I think it's also worth giving him some credit, some benefit of the doubt that there's more to this than just the things you're doing. There's the reason you're doing it, and frankly, he said a lot of this is to combat the sort of, negative, false form of communication that exists online between people, where it's not you're not actually communicating with each other. You're just kind of saying things at one another from usually from an anonymous position or whatever, and it can be positive or negative. He's trying to create according to him, a game that teaches you the power of positivity and caring for others, through this, if you will, walking simulator type.
And he specifically mentions, he uses the letter thing, where someone at war is sending a letter to a loved one at home, but there's that delay where the actual letter has to be given to the military, who will then take care of sending it. So it's often months before the other person receives it, and the person who reads the letter then has to put themselves in the shoes of the person that sent it, their loved one, and think about what were they experiencing at the time, what were the meaning they were trying to glean from it. And that's a really interesting way to come at this concept of, leaving messages or doing things that impact the world that other people can experience themselves. And we've seen it done in FromSoft games and stuff, and various other games where you leave a message, but it's always either vague or very direct, door up ahead or boss up ahead or something like that. This is a version of it where it's let me truly think about why this person left a ladder here but it didn't reach the other side. What does that mean? Is it up to me to take that as I tried my best and this is the best I could do, or is this the case of I'm here trying to trick people into drowning in this?
Right, and so he was saying, I was okay, you talk this big game about everyone working together, in harmony, but what's to stop people from trolling each other? He actually described a scenario where maybe there's a ladder that takes you out over a cliff, maybe you fall off that cliff because the ladder doesn't go all the way, yada yada. And he really he repeated himself. He's I don't think there will be intentional evil between players, which that seems a little naive to me. I hate to say. To his admission, he doesn't get to play many games these days. I don't know that he really understands how people will act when they have that connection, when they can do stuff like that with impunity, right? Nothing's going to happen to them. He has a system for rewarding people that do good things, right? There's a like system, but there's been no punishment type system that's been described.
Right.
And I do worry a little bit that might derail some of what he's going for, and ultimately some of what Death Stranding might be at its core.
Yeah, it's you have to wonder if what the game is, and like I said, I've been avoiding because I think it's something that I just want to experience. It seems like something that's intended to just be experienced and not dissected from trailers.
Yeah.
I would hope that something about it encourages earnestness, earnesty. So,
Ernesty Goes to Hollywood?
Wow. I would hope that people come into it with a honest, open,
on good
perspective. Yeah, on good faith. Engage with that in good faith. Because, obviously there are people who are not, but I think some games make that easier for people to do because there is no way to punish them, for example.
Technically, you could leave a rope in this game that takes someone down a cliff, and they can't get back up because they have to drop down to the next ledge, because maybe they live in a world where everyone's so nice, but then they meet that one person who's no, you're trapped. And he described that you can get trapped like in something like that, and so you
Yeah.
have to literally take your own life. You have
But-
to jump off that cliff.
And in that
What else are you
moment,
gonna do?
like his point is like in that moment, I want people to consider that action the
It wasn't
kind of,
evil. Like maybe
yeah.
they did it by accident.
Yeah, like
right? Yeah.
maybe they did it by accident. Maybe that person didn't have the rope to make it all the way and suffered a similar fate. But also, like, I think he kind of like, I don't know if it's the translation or maybe I'm reading into it differently. But it seemed like he wanted people to think like, is this something that I would do? Like, would I do this now?
Right.
Like, if you're on the receiving end of something that's like that, a troll or a misfortunate event like that, he wants you to think, man, I'd never do this to anyone because it feels rough. And that's at least an interesting way to approach something that's common in games now, like leaving messages.
Reinforcing that though, I think it's going to have to come from what the story is trying to do.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
So when it comes to not understanding what Death Stranding is, I'm cool saying that about the story and reveling in that, because I think that's half the fun, is discovering what weird twists, yes, what strange characters, of course, but you know, what the messaging is. Kojima always has some sort of commentary. There's been a couple other interviews where he gets into that a little bit, but you know, if not in the systems themselves, maybe the story will be the thing that really gets people into the mindset that we're talking about,
Yeah.
where it's meant to be sympathetic, it's meant to be empathetic.
That's sort of what I was getting at. Like, maybe there's a way to put people in the right headspace to get into that, like to get into the Omoi-yari.
Yeah.
Feeling.
I think part of it is like Norman Reedus also like complains about things like vocally during the game, like so he's like, God, this is so difficult or so arduous, like out loud.
Yeah.
So maybe that might even like put you in a state of where you feel some sympathy for what he's
Well,
going
nobody
through.
wants to disappoint Norman Reedus.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a,
I don't understand the
that's
culture
just
around
science.
him, but okay.
Yeah, I don't get it either, but I guess like that does make sense. Like if he's complaining constantly and then you're playing as him and then you find that water bottle that I left you,
Right.
maybe you will be inclined to be like, damn, that's a good water bottle.
Yeah.
You know,
Thanks,
thumbs up
Tam.
there. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit of like willful ignorance which is happening on the internet right now, which I'm not here to take a stance on, but it seems like the thing to do is be like, oh, I don't get this game at all.
Yeah.
This is so wacky. Look at Kojima being so weird. And again, I'm not a Kojima one-man Kojima defense force, but like, I like it. I like to see him like very, very obviously dance around, you know, like things like genre tropes and things like genre labels to create something that's sounds ridiculous, but at least makes you think about it a little deeper. He could have said it's an open world walking simulator where you carry luggage, or an open world puzzle game, or
Survival game
a
or
survival
whatever.
game. But like at the end of the day, like that means you just in your mind, it's just the mystique is gone. Like, do you still have that kind of like desire to figure it out once someone's gone? It's an open world survival game. You don't really.
Versus
Yeah.
what does being a survival game mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what headspace does that put you in?
Or even like when you have an expectation for what a survival game or an open world survival game is, then it doesn't do that thing.
Yeah.
Then you're put in a position to be disappointed if you have that expectation.
Yeah.
So why create that expectation?
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like people need to relax a bit. Let the man and his team, or various people who have clearly put a lot of time, effort, and thought into it, do their thing instead of just being so ready to snap at it and tear it down and not give him the benefit of the doubt, or give them the benefit. I don't want to act like it's just him doing it on his own.
Yeah.
Sure, and honestly what you're saying should be true for most game developers and studios
Yeah.
that haven't burned their audience in the past. And to that point, I think like Kojima has a pretty strong track record of delivering games that either meet or surpass expectations. I mean, he didn't
Yeah.
get to where he is, and his team didn't get to where they are by doing things worthy of ridicule.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that are in there that are definitely open to debate and in some cases probably ridicule. But at the same time, like, there's so much interesting stuff in his history that it just seems worth giving him a little bit of our trust.
Yeah.
But also like just being okay with not understanding things. Like not everything needs to be explained.
Hello, that's part of the reason I love Control.
Yeah, like
You know?
not every piece of, you know, whatever you want to call it, art, media, whatever, not everything needs to be like clean cut and perfectly tied up with a bow. Like it's okay for it to be confusing. And I just get frustrated with the like, it's positioned as such a negative point. Like
Yeah.
we don't know anything about
Yeah.
Death Stranding yet. And it's like, well,
we don't know if it's good or bad. That's
we
pretty
don't
much
know.
what we don't know.
Yeah, we just don't
Yeah.
know. We don't know what the experience is to be a person playing Death Stranding. That's all. Like, that's the question we need to answer. But why answer like what is it?
I just really love that there's this game coming out that is just so singular of a vision that a group of people that have had, that there's others that don't understand it. And that's like, I feel like that's something to be like held in high regard and praised, that someone has announced a game or is showing off a game that everyone isn't immediately like, I know exactly what that is.
Right.
It's not, I know that is a third person cover shooter.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of, by getting caught up and hung up on, like Kallie said, I don't understand this at all. It kind of ruins the magic of games a bit. Like, why do you need to understand it? Like Kallie said, like, do you remember when you looked at a game and was like, I don't get this. I'm so excited to unpack it and figure it out. It's exactly what you said about Control, right? Like, I feel like Remedy were masterful in how much they revealed there. Like, and perhaps it's even more of an achievement for them because the building blocks of that game are very familiar. It looks like a shooting game, but then the more you play it, the more you realize, I don't understand this at all, but I'm like desperate to, and I'm like picking it apart and figuring it out. And then you come away with like an experience, and you come away like changed by it, or at least you have an impression of it on your life, your gaming career, whatever it may be, your experience. At least the time you played with it is like, I tried to figure this thing out. I'm so glad that they're making a game where it's like, we're not going to explain this to you. You're going to play the game and you'll experience it, and either you'll like it or you won't. But yeah, I'm kind of reveling in the fact that it feels so good to be excited about a game that I know is going to catch me off guard, if you get what I'm saying. Like, I'm playing stuff like Borderlands now and I'm enjoying it, but it's still like, it's Borderlands. I know exactly what I'm getting at this.
Yeah.
Even something
that game is marketing itself.
Yeah.
But there's merit in that too. Like, it's not that like
exactly.
the unexplained is better than like something straightforward.
It's different. It can't be held to the same standards,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, like Fire Emblem's a great example of that. Like, it's very familiar pieces, but it's still a really good game, and I'm enjoying it. But at the same time, I'm playing Fire Emblem, and I'm like, I get this. I like what I'm playing, but I get it. Gears, I know what this is. Death Stranding, I'm like, I know when I pick that up, it's going to be something that I don't really understand for a really long time, and I'm not 100% sure whether I like it or not. I'm excited about that.
I love when I get a feeling out of a piece of media.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that, you know, I can't even explain like what it's really about, or even if I can explain what it's about. Like, I think a lot of poetry is like that, honestly. Like, maybe that's like a stuffy answer, but like, I think something that imparts a feeling onto you is really powerful, and you don't have to understand all the parts. So I'm looking forward to like maybe never understanding what Death Stranding like is really about, but getting my own experience out of it. And I think the concept of Omoi-yari that you talked about with him has really sold me on it. Like, that is such a cool, powerful thing to me that, like, yes, it's not a Japanese only concept, but like, we don't have an English word for it. And so to hear or to read about him explaining that and like what that means, that's not a thing that we actively think about in our day-to-day life. And I'm really excited to get something out of that, even if it's not understanding.
Like a real life analogy that I went through, because I used to do hiking a lot, you know, on the Appalachian Trail, sometimes you have to go through towns. And so you would exit the woods and you'd get to like a little, like, you know, maybe like half a mile you'd have to walk through a town. So people would leave coolers, like locals would leave coolers with sodas and water for the hikers and stuff. And he was describing this like cabin on Mount Fuji that sort of serves the same purpose as like your safe house, you know, in Death Stranding. And I was like, having experienced something like that in the real world, like, I immediately thought, wow, this is really awesome. I wonder who are the people that did this. That's so kind of them. Like, this whole narrative about who they are, why they did it, like maybe where that came from for them, like, that all went through my mind. If he can pull that off in game form, awesome. I am a little skeptical still, but I have hope, and I want it to happen.
It's the idea of paying forward, isn't it? Like, will you do that?
Of course, with a balance of things such as staring at Norman Reedus' dick,
and, you know,
XYZ, right? Like,
using urine grenades.
You can do that?
Not his actual peen, but you can stare at his crotch when he's like resting in his safe house, because, you know, you're actually controlling the soul that controls what he does.
ありがとうございます。はい、もう一回行くと。まあこういうこともあるんでですね。
See, this is when Death Stranding starts to get into that, like,
so Kojima described it as a Bishoujo game.
yeah,
Where
sort of like how
you're-
like,
See, I am totally in the dark on this.
Yeah,
but
so
I'm
you're
here for it.
ogling Norman Reedus,
Right.
and like he's in the room.
There
so
is
the
such
justification
a big
is that you're a
market
soul.
for that.
yeah,
There is such a big market for that.
if
The
you're
man
in-
knows what the
yeah.
people want.
but and that's just it. I think is that there's a lot of things that Death Stranding can be and that it is. So like maybe sure the walking simulator part doesn't do it for you, right? But you can still expect a ton of melodrama, right? Probably some twists, probably some messaging about, you know, real life beyond the internet that we're describing with Omoi-yari. Like, I think there's going to be a lot to this game that people will find interesting.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it's going to be good, but I'm super curious to find out.
Well, yeah. I am more curious after this conversation.
Yeah.
I was already like so in the dark that
Was it the Norman Reedus thing?
it was
Yeah.
definitely, you know, contributed to it, sure.
Sure.
But yeah, like it remains to be seen, obviously, but it's coming out very soon, relatively.
November.
It's
Weeks.
kind of like, I know, it like kind of snuck up on me. But yeah, let us know what you think about the game.
You, this Kallie is now. I'm the soul in the room.
I know.
More like
That's Death
Norman
Stranding.
Peters. Have some of that.
I'm gonna stop recording. And I stopped.
You don't want a blooper reel of us doing snake
That's how it should end. I'm pretty sure we have that too.